Welcome back. This is the Weekend Report. I'm Masachaba Mposwa. The Democratic Alliance has filed an urgent application with the Western Cape High Court to have the budget passed in Parliament declared invalid. This was after it could not reach consensus with its key coalition partner, the ANC, on the value-added tax hike as recommended by the Finance Minister for 2025. This saw non-GNU members, Action SA and Build One South Africa, voting alongside the ANC in favor of the budget adoption. Could the DA and ANC's irreconcilable differences lead to a bitter end to the GNU union? And will Action SA and BOSA take up the space in the coalition? Well, political commentator and lecturer at the Central University of Technology, Leeto Nthoba, weighs in. Good morning, Leeto. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Masachaba. Thank you for having me.
Before we dive in, how would you describe the relationship between the ANC and the DA at this point?
I think the relationship between the DA and the ANC has always been fraught, right, inside the GNU, because ever since, even in its inception, the GNU did not seem like a governing effort. It seemed like an exclusionary effort that was made to not unite the parties of the left, so your ANC, the MK, and EFF. And so that fracture had always been there. And you've seen it ever since the DA joined the GNU. Every part of the legislation that ANC tries to put forward was always lumbering and cumbersome, and even doubts whether or not the ministers responsible for those portfolios would execute said legislation. And so I think this is when everything has come to a head, because the differences are so vast that they can't find each other outside of the threat of the left.
Nomvula Mokunyana said that the DA can't play double standards. They can't be in opposition when it suits them and be an executive when it suits them. She's basically saying that the DA can't have it both ways, being part of the government while also acting as an opposition party. Now, do you think that the DA is playing for both sides in this situation?
Yes, it is, because if you look at it, and that's why I think the ANC was under false pretenses why the DA joined the GNU. They thought the DA was joining the GNU to co-govern with the ANC, while the DA actually joined the GNU to be the prefect over the GNU, right? If this is some kind of high school musical, then the DA assumed itself as the head boy or head girl of the Prefects Association to try to police the moves that the ANC makes in order to moderate them to more center politics than left politics. And so, to ANC's surprise, whenever they're making a move, the DA doesn't make a counter move that would improve the governance structure. But what it does, they make policing movements to say, well, don't pass Bella yet. Let's take it to another consultative period. Let's rethink expropriation. Don't pass the VAT Act. And they don't give any alternative to a better rule. And I think that's what the ANC thought they were bringing into the GNU, the expertise of clean governance from the DA in order to cleanse themselves of whatever sin they think the DA has, the ANC has committed in the past.
Right, and this tension is not new, as the DA has been quite critical of the ANC's policies. Now, do you think that these two parties could ever work succinctly or perfectly when both parties are having different visions, essentially, for the country?
I don't think they can, because they're not even in sync, right? Let's take this, the VAT increase, for instance, in the budget in and of itself, right? When they start negotiating, their starting positions are so disparate from each other that you don't even see them finding each other. The DA is talking about decreasing the public wage bill, stopping spending into the state-owned enterprises, while the ANC is trying to maintain the status quo and trying to find ways in which they can fund the way South Africa works and trying to actually come out of austerity through spending. And so those two positions are polar opposites. And then when they do sit down to negotiate, the DA then says, okay, we're going to negotiate, if we are to believe the ANC and how they negotiated with them. The ANC says, the DA sits down and says, okay, take away expropriation and we'll accept VAT, right? And so now they're negotiating about two different things, ANC is talking about budget, they're talking about policy. And those two positions will never be the same, because now debating policy for budget seems like you are selling out the people as the ANC perceives it in order for you to achieve a temporary gain. And I think they'll never actually find each other, because they were never close to each other to begin with.
Now, Leeto, which parties might stand to gain from these developments surrounding the ANC and the DA?
I think the smaller parties are gaining, right? Because they then are able to separate themselves from the DA. Initially, we had thought your bossas, your Action SAs would actually stick with the DA in sort of being the prefect. So they'll be the deputy head boy and deputy head girl of this high school musical. But they seem to now be thinking of themselves as it pertains to the GNU, but also their vision of the future in general. But then secondly, I think the left-leaning parties are also winning, because they had been the prophets of doom from the beginning. MK and EFF had already said, well, this is not going to work, they're going to lose, and the ANC is eventually going to come and ask us for help, and this is where it's going. And now, can you call it a GNU if the ANC constantly has to go and pray for the EFF or the MK's help?
On that note, what can you say about the sudden alliance between Action SA and the ANC? Are there any potential self-driven benefits?
Not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term, they've secured themselves as a secure partner in the GNU, right? And so, so not even just Action SA, but also Gaten McKenzie's PA. They've shown themselves to be reliable to the ANC's cause, and so the ANC considers them as stable, and they don't need to negotiate with them anymore. So even if you bring in a new partner and take out the DA, these two will be considered as on the ANC side, and the others will always have to be roped in. And I think they're strengthening their positions as leading or ruling parties, so they are showing their ruling muscle, whereas the DA hasn't shown that. They are a ruling national party.
Do you think that the DA would consider forming a coalition with other opposition parties to contest the 2026 municipal elections?
I don't see that happening, because who do they have? Other opposition parties are just MK and EFF. And the DA, if an organization had a personality, they would hate the EFF to the bone. And so I don't see them approaching the EFF. But also, their voter base is also very opposed to the Zuma family, which is closely linked to the MK. And so they don't have any other hope but to then take up their position as strong opposition again. And strong opposition isn't government. Even though their strong opposition was good in building a strong South African political base, it doesn't make for a good governing party, and taking them out of that rut was going to be this GNU, which is not working the way they thought it would.
With all this said, what role would smaller parties like Action SA and BOSA play in the GNU? Would they be able to have significant influence on policy decisions?
I don't think they want to have significant influence on policy positions as such, but to prove themselves as parties that are worthy of those parliamentary seats. Before this, think about it. Smaller parties had a very tough time proving themselves worthy of their seats. You'd win 10 seats, and then it will be diminishing returns from there. But in this instance, they're showing themselves to be very strong with 1, 2, 3 seats. And so then it leaves a lot of wonder in the public's mind to say, should we give them more and see what they do with them? And I think it's a good building block for the next election, and not necessarily currently making them any kind of stronger negotiator inside the GNU in and of itself.
All right. Some are saying that the IFP's decision to participate in the GNU led to a loss of their distinct political identity. Do you think that the IFP will challenge the ANC's policies ever again?
They're always susceptible to doing it, right? And the IFP is very good at being discerning in how it decides where to put its votes. And so it's never been just an ANC-aligned party or an opposition-aligned party. They go with their conscience more than any other party in South Africa. They would shift their alliances just to to make sure that they, as the IFP, their identity is actually kept succinct with the country. They are a common sense party, right? The IFP was not talking politics in this instance. They were saying, we need to pass this budget. There's no other way. All the other creative ways are maybes. The VAT increase is a way in which we can move the country forward. If we want to negotiate something else, let's do it at another time. And I think this is the identity of the IFP, and those who vote for the IFP love the IFP for that very reason.
Now, Professor Leeto Nthoba said that the ANC may have the number, but the DA has a good record of good governance. Would you say that the statement is correct? And especially looking at the new cabinet that we have, which includes ministers and deputy ministers from the DA?
Of course, the DA, that's their shining grace, right? That's the light that they cast upon the South African political landscape, that they have this record of good governance. But the problem is, the reason why South Africans don't trust the DA is they do have good governance, but that governance seems to come at the expense of others, right? You see a good, clean Cape Town in the city center. The more you go out of that city center, the less that clean governance looks. It looks like clean governance and dirty townships. It looks like clean governance and negotiating against expropriation of land. It looks like clean governance and negotiating against Bela. And those seem like racial lines ever more clearly in South Africa today. And so there's a distrust of this clean party.
All right. Now, lastly, and before we let you go, and briefly, let's talk about the DA's court case against the approved budget in Parliament. Do they have a strong legal leg to stand on in challenging the budget's approval?
They do, because the matter they're going to challenge is procedural, right? But I don't think the court would go as far as halting the budget this year because it's already passed, right? I think that would be going a tad too far. I don't think the court would venture into those waters. But making unconstitutional some of the provisions on VAT, given the powers given to the finance minister, I think they also got a good leg to stand on there. And so it's a two-pronged problem. I think it's a good case for the future, but in the present, it's a very big L that they have to carry as the DA in that GNU.